That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Just drill in the screw.
Space is a pretty difficult place to get to. It might come as a surprise, I know, but it does take the very few who make it up their years of experience before they get to play around in zero gravity. Not to mention the costs of launching even this tiny JPEG out of the atmosphere. Me and my buddies Rhetoric, we don't have that kind of time. But thankfully the guys at 2 Point Interactive have created a game that made it possible for us to get wacky in space, and it's called Heavenly Bodies. The two of us actually played Heavenly Bodies around the time it came out, and I wish I could have recorded it back then, but, well, I wasn't making videos back then. And by the time I started, Jacksepticeye and Markiplier had stolen my idea anyway, and would have probably sued me if I tried. In fact, just bringing it up now puts me in incredible legal danger. Luckily, 2 Point Interactive got us covered yet again with the release of the Cleanup DLC, offering me a chance to make right on my mistake. But before getting into what the DLC is about, I'll quickly run through the overall concept of the game, just to get you up to speed in case you've never heard of it. Let me just paste that. Heavenly Bodies is a game about cosmonauts, the body, and the absence of gravity. Discover the ever-changing nuances of weightless motion in this challenging physics game. Cleanup DLC takes place as direct consequence of the events of the main game. Therefore, it'd be difficult to talk about it without any spoilers, so take this as your last warning. Anyway, I'll leave more rambling for the end of the video. Let's get into the Heavenly Bodies Cleanup DLC. The first day started with me fixing my video settings, after which we realized we'd been woken up by loud alarms, which was probably not good. Just like in the main game, you start a mission by interacting with this computer thing called a comms terminal, and in this DLC it will give you a briefing for the day's tasks.
This nearby space station has received critical damage from the explosive decommissioning of HP-01. The power module driving the station's core systems has been disabled and requires immediate attention. Use the available tools and components to restore its function. Once complete, the signal station must be used to evaluate the full extent of the damage to the space station.
If you don't know, HP-01 is a station from the main game, which blew up at the end and the crew had to be evacuated back to whatever planet that is. Anyway, it seems some of the debris from that explosion damaged the station we're in now, so our main objective was going to be repairing some of that damage. To help us with that, the comms terminal also gave us an operations manual, with instructions crucial to completing the day's tasks. In this case, extinguishing the fires, replacing the blown fuse, and recoupling the cables. Almost instantly, the difficulty of the controls kicked us in the teeth, or rather the helmet visor, because we ended up spending an actually impressive amount of time trying to get out of the bedroom. Zeeb also thought that stealing my fire extinguisher would make for a funny prank, but the punchline was us wasting even more time trying to get it back. Eventually, we did get to extinguishing some of those flames with varying levels of success. Oh, we also discovered a tool storage room, which does play an important role throughout the DLC. You see, these lockers will progressively unlock with each day that goes by, amounting to a total of 6 different tools for different missions. Though some of them, like the drill, would be useful for pretty much the entirety of the game, while others, such as the scanner looking thing here, have very specific gimmick mechanics and will only be used once. Getting back to the task at hand, we had to put out the last few fires so we could reconnect the cables and replace the fuse. But Z started dealing with some sort of paralysis, leaving me to restore power to the station alone. A nondescript medical specialist later diagnosed him with some bad network disorder and recommended a treatment of restarting the game, after which he was back in peak condition, so 5 stars. Our last task was using the signal station to look around for any more of those defects that we'd have to repair around our base.
The signal station provides a visual overview of the station and nearby surroundings. Points of interest highlight station issues requiring attention. Explore the station to reveal them.
This is a pretty neat mechanic. You can zoom in, zoom out, rotate it, and it does come into play a couple times, but all of that will have to wait because our shift was now over and we were ready to go back to sleep.
Many of the station's core systems are no longer operational and require repair. However, hazardous space debris litters the station and must be removed. Your briefing for removing this debris will arrive tomorrow. You may rest safe at the sleeping quarters until then.
This will be the formula for the entire DLC. Get briefed, carry out the tasks, receive the debriefing, take a nap. Which is once again similar to the main game, with the only difference being the splitting by days instead of missions. If I had to give my opinion on it, which I will, it is my video after all, I'd say that this system got old pretty quick. In fact, a lot of things in this DLC get old pretty quick, as you'll probably come to find out. Let's not worry about that yet, there's still plenty more days to go.
This station is equipped with a scrapper. It is used to recycle and repurpose space debris. It is currently accessible due to mechanical faults. A magnetic attractor has been made available to assist in accessing the scrapper and collecting the debris.
Ah, the magnet. One of the most useful tools of the DLC, but also probably one of the most infuriating. As you could assume, the magnet is used to pull things in, which sounds like an amazing thing, but with great power comes great responsibility, and me and Z are not the most capable of hands to be holding this thing. However, as repelling as a magnet could possibly be, it is a vital key to accomplishing most of the tasks throughout the game. Probably more vital than we were. After using the magnet to open the door to the scrapper, we started collecting some scrap to fuel the machine. At first, we tried doing this manually, then we tried with the magnet, but eventually we figured out how to use this claw thing and we got the task done in no time. Take that, magnet. Anyway, that was actually it for today, but we weren't quite done yet though. You see, out here in the cold, silent void of space, the mind begins to wander. Recycling scrap, it's a concept as old as time, sure. But what if you tried recycling people? It didn't take much persuasion to get Z to float his ass into the scrapper. In fact, he was just as curious as I was. All I had to do was press the button. Alright, let's see.
Nothing. It said no.
Alright, just cut to the briefing.
The station's interior is now clear of debris. However, the external debris is preventing deliveries from being made. Your briefing for accessing the station's exterior will arrive tomorrow. You may rest until it arrives. The station's airlock systems and scrapper bay doors have taken damage from external debris and will require repair. A drill tool has been made available to assist with these repairs. Once outside, piloted maneuvering units, PMU, will provide mobility when performing external operations. Use them to assist with the maintenance work and debris removal.
Day 3. A pretty pivotal day in the Heavenly Bodies cleanup DLC, with the introduction of the drill tool, but also more importantly, probably the best thing to come out of this expansion, the jetpack. Sorry, I mean the piloted maneuvering unit. Nerd. While there are some kinks with the jetpack, I never really got tired of it, and neither did Z. Flying around like some scientific Superman was great fun, and like kids with their favorite Christmas present, we loved them so much that we even tried to go to bed with them. They use the same mechanics as the spacecraft from the main game, only in a much smaller, perfectly sized, dopamine-filled package for the whole family to enjoy. Yeah, the drill. Well, what do you want to know? It drills. There's a bunch of screws around the station, and we did need it to fix the airlocks to the jetpack, so that's cool, I guess. But it's just not the jetpack, you know? Having also made it to day 3, we were feeling pretty good about ourselves. We were finally growing into our astronaut suits, and we even started developing some, well, unorthodox ways of making our way around the station. We were at peak productivity, but do you remember what I said about things getting old?
Recycle enough scrap to clear the area.
It's only one more time though. Surely it wouldn't become a key repetitive aspect of missions throughout the DLC, right? Z did figure out that he could attach the magnet to his PMU and collect the scrap more efficiently that way. However, it was also the main issue with the magnet. For one, the button to activate it is the same button as to attach it to you, so whenever you'd want to turn the magnet off, you'd instead be stuck in this cycle of constantly detaching and reattaching it to your belt. Your arm can also easily get stuck on it, and in many cases it will get in the way because of how bulky it is. And yeah, I know, a poor worker blames his tools, but come on, look at it. Anyway, we weren't gonna let some menial labor and minor inconveniences run our spirits, so we just got to work recycling the scrap. Repairing the airlocks was also pretty fun. They all had different ways of doing it, like this one where we had to use the magnet to plug this thing in. And Z was also kind enough to demonstrate the consequences of the incorrect operations of the airlocks. How considerate. Some time flying around with a piece of scrap later, and after repairing the last of the airlocks, we managed to recycle enough to satisfy whoever was giving us these tasks. Turns out Z had other plans once again though. Probably some insurance fraud if I had to guess.
With external debris now cleared, new components can be delivered safely. Rest until the delivery and your next briefing arrives.
My dumbass actually forgot to start a recording on day 4, so I won't have the first few minutes of the day, but here's the briefing for now.
It's critical that we obtain data on what caused the explosive decommission of HP-01. Reports show that the comms terminals from HP-01 will contain this information. To aid in locating the terminals, a signal station extension has been delivered and a radio scanner has been made available. Install the signal station extension and retrieve the data from the comms terminals.
Also, going back to record this, I've noticed that they have made some minor changes to the UI and it looks pretty neat. Just goes to show that... What? Oh. Never mind, turns out those changes were not intended, just forget you saw anything. What we essentially did in this lost footage was replace a component on that antenna from the beginning and used it to look around for those comms terminals mentioned in the briefing. Which also leads us to the point I realized I was an idiot and finally started recording. Each of these comms terminals is in a small rack of HB01, each requiring different methods in order to get in. This first one, for instance, made use of the magnet. Z pulled some loose scrap around to press a button, like one of those ball maze toys, but I had to attach the antenna to the terminal and point it towards our station in order to relay the data. The second terminal wasn't too complex either, we just had to connect some cables and clear the door of Dwayne Johnson's. But the last one, ho. For this one, I first had to turn on the water valve, and at this point the hose started pretending like there was water coming out of it, which wasn't ideal, but eventually I did manage to grab hold of it and get it to dispense water for real, which we needed to turn this turbine to move this plate thing out of the way so it could grab the fuse, which meant we then had to turn the turbine the other way to move the plate back and plug the fuse in the other socket so it would power the door, which led to the comms terminal. That being said, that was all for the day. It was a pretty short one, all things considered, but don't worry, if you love the sight of comms terminals, you will get another good look at them soon enough.
The data retrieved from the comms terminals is providing valuable, but more data will be required for full analysis. Another extension to the signal station will be necessary in the search for the other terminals. Rest until the next delivery. A new wave of debris has hit the station and has caused damage to the external power systems. Before the search for the comms terminals can continue, these repairs must be made and the scrap must be cleared. A leak detector and tape dispenser have been made available to assist with repairing the external power systems.
The leak detector and tape dispenser. Pretty self-explanatory. The tape dispenser is just a tape gun which dispenses this yellow worm thing, and the leak detector is a scanner that detects leaks. The tape dispenser does come in use following this mission too, but the leak detector, well, let's just say it's only here for a good time, not a long time. There is one cool detail about this mission though, about detecting leaks specifically. In theory, you could slowly pull your way along the panels to find the 4 leaks with the scanner, but if you instead listen closely, you can actually hear them. Oh, here. This narrows down the area you need to scan, thus saving some time, which is always welcome, especially since the leaks aren't the only thing on your to-do list today. We also had to replace a couple of solar panels, and yes, I say a couple, even though I could just say 2, but the definition of a couple is a pair, so... Before replacing the panels though, we first had to bring them outside, and believe me, if you think opening a can of pickles is hard. My solution to getting the solar panels out of the station was creating this conga line and pulling them behind me. Genius, I know, and I even used the PMU instead of having to drag myself along. The only problem was that the solar panels would keep getting stuck on the edges, and I had to go back and wiggle them to get them unstuck, then fly another few meters until they'd get stuck again. Which is also why I think solar energy is stupid and we should just keep burning petrol until every living thing on this planet is a dead one. Anyway, after replacing the old solar panels with the new ones and after taping over all the leaks on the other side of the station, guess what it was time for? The sponsor of today's episode. Nah, unfortunately there is no sponsor, so instead we'll just have to do some more scrap recycling. Not that we really had a choice.
With external scrap cleared, new components can be delivered safely. Rest until the deliver and your next briefing arrives.
So before getting into what day 6 had in store for us, I wanted to talk about this thing you probably noticed on the first day of the DLC. We did notice it looked kinda like a rocket. What's that? What are you interacting with?
That's a good question.
It looks like a rocket thing, but we didn't really know what it was, nor was it brought up until this next day either. Essentially, it's a pedestal for 3 different pieces of a collectible, and you'd have to assemble all of them for a special secret mega collectible. Collectibles were a thing in the main game too. They were part of bonus challenges for each mission, and they also contributed towards one final achievement. The collectible in this DLC though? Well, it shows up in the level selection menu, which is cool I guess, but apart from that there's no achievements, no challenges, it's just a thing you can do.
A new signal range extension has been delivered to the station for installation. Once installed, use the signal station to locate and retrieve the data from the remaining comms terminals.
Yeah, essentially just day 4 all over again. I did say you'd see the comms terminals again though. It was at this point that the repetitive nature of these tasks started to weigh on us, even in zero gravity. It was not that we were getting tired of the mechanics, at least I wasn't. It was just that we were doing the same thing over and over and over again. Unfortunately to me, it really feels like the devs felt pressured to add more content to this DLC. Maybe to justify the weight or the price. Because at no point in the main game did I feel this way. Either way, the level design was still incredible and the gameplay still complemented it, so I did have the motivation to push on. So to get to the first of the 3 comms terminals, we had to use the tape gun to seal some leaks and pressurize the inside of the wreck, which ended up blowing the lid off. The second terminal was the beast of the 3. At first it was pretty straightforward, move a fuse from one socket to the other, plug in a cable, nothing too complex. The magnet was getting in my way though, so I tried passing it over to Z, but I guess LeBron James possessed me for a moment because I ended up yanking that thing straight into the back rooms. Traversing through the wreck would not be so easy. By then we'd already gotten used to taking the PMUs everywhere, and I think most people would at this point, but the devs probably knew that. They put in these rods that made it a bit tougher to fly in, and little did we know that we were flying into a Chinese finger trap. Once inside, we realized we'd need that one fuse from the beginning to open various doors to get to the terminal. So I tried going back to get it, but that's when it dawned on me. The jetpack was too big to easily make it through the rods, and since they were also angled towards me, I couldn't push my way past them either. Eventually, I did manage to wrestle my way through them, but that's not the end of it. After nearly losing the fuse, I decided to detach myself from the PMU in order to get back with more ease. Now, in my mind, I thought the jetpack would stop right about where I left it, but that's not how vacuum works. So instead of staying where I left it, my PMU floated off into space. This is where another aspect I love about this game is apparent. The punishment for mistakes like this. I've already mentioned how we were feeling tired about having to do the same task yet again, and just like in the real world, when you're tired, you make stupid mistakes. Luckily, since there were 2 of us, we still technically had 1 jetpack to get back. For the time being, we managed to get a fuse into the last socket with this cool centrifuge mechanic and relay the data from the comms terminal. We also collected the first fragment of the rocket collectible. Screwed in at the end of the wreckage was this hatch, and fortunately I also had the drill on me, so we were able to get it open. This way we didn't have to go back through the rods and we flew straight back to the station. After Z got a little revenge for wasting his time, or maybe it was just another insurance fraud, it's really hard to tell with him. I re-equipped myself with a PMU and we made our way back to the last comms terminal. This one was actually pretty fun to solve. First we had to open the door using some debris to push a button. I actually think you can also use these soda cans to throw them onto the button through this hole, but we didn't try that. By the way, you can also use soda cans to propel yourself through space for brief periods of time, which is especially useful if you're playing on Newtonian. Oh, right, you probably don't know what that is. So the game has 3 difficulty settings. Assistant, basically baby mode, don't let anyone catch you playing on this. There's also Classic, which is what me and Z played, that essentially gives you more freedom of movement but the game doesn't do anything for you. And then there's Newtonian, which has a more realistic momentum simulation and is basically there for anyone who wants to replay the game with more of a challenge. All of these are unlocked from the beginning, there's no need to play them in a certain order, but I recommend starting with Classic and then moving on to Newtonian. If you're even thinking of playing on Assisted, just stop watching the video. Anyway, getting back to work, Z went inside to tie down some cords so he could clear the way for me to pull a fuse along to open the door to the terminal. I know, it sounds complicated, but just look at a video and you'll know exactly what I mean. Unless you're blind, in which case, I'm sorry. One of the cords was missing though, so we did have to use the magnet to pull it, meaning the soda can tactic from earlier wouldn't save you from taking it along at all. That was about it for the day though, so we got to work collecting the last 2 of the toy rocket parts. The magnet is also useful here because the segments are magnetic and it meant retrieving them wasn't all that difficult either. I mean, one of them was literally just floating around near the space station and the other one you had to unscrew the lid off of, which by then we were experts at. As I said, the collectible doesn't do anything though.
From our analysis of the retrieved data, we've determined that the decommissioning of HP-01 was caused by the presence of foreign body. Specialized equipment will be required to locate and remove the threat. Rest until the next briefing arrives. To locate the foreign body, a final signal range extension has been delivered. Install the extension to the signal station dish and use the signal station. Once complete, you will be provided with a briefing on the booster.
Day 7. The last day. Probably the most confusing day too, at least in regards to the ending. But let's just go through it first. The first order of business for the day was to install yet another addition to the signal array. Nothing too difficult, we've done it twice before, except for the fact that we started the day as conjoined twins. So actually, I guess separating ourselves was the first task of the day. Extension installed, we then used the signal station to locate this asteroid where, I guess, the foreign body was chilling. This also triggered the next part of the briefing, telling us that all the stuff with the scrapper wasn't just to pad out the playtime. No, it actually contributed towards making a power cell for this booster. And if you're confused, don't worry, we were too. Thankfully, we'd have some time to ponder over it while doing some more scrapping. And after recycling enough to fuel this power cell, I decided to go get some alphabeti spaghetti. Little did I know that the game had one last trick up its sleeve. The crash at desktop meant that we had to redo the entirety of day 7, so instead we went back to bed and tried the next day. Once we had the battery, the next objective was getting the booster out of the station and onto the asteroid thing. I used the same tactic as with the solar panels and it did work. The problem was that the booster was too big for me to operate the airlock. In hindsight, what I should have done is left the booster in the airlock and closed it from inside the station so that Z could just pick it up from the outside. But our final solution was arguably better. It was quite a trip down to the asteroid, and once we did make it, we had a revelation. With his theory of relativity, Einstein proposed that all objects, even subatomic matter, create a dent in the fabric of space and time, and the heavier the object, the greater the dent, so other objects in its vicinity will fall towards it. What I mean to say is that we realized the asteroid had its own gravity, and that posed a problem. You might be saying, "What? You idiot! How is that a problem? We have gravity on Earth and we're all good." Yeah, but have you tried carrying a however many ton rocket booster on Earth? And also, the controls weren't made for you to walk in this game. The most you can do is stomp your leg in the ground, so yes, it was a problem. However, after some complex tactics, we did manage to get the booster onto the marked zone, which triggered it to deploy some tiny legs and drill down into the surface of the asteroid. At this point, we were struggling to understand why we were doing this, but we didn't really have any other option than to keep going. Z attached a wire from the booster to this detonator thing, which was one of the tools we were given that day. After that, I plugged in the battery, and what happened next blew us away. Literally. And that was it, the Heavenly Bodies Cleanup DLC. Now I know you must have some burning questions, and believe me, I do too. I mean, to us it looked like we just planted an engine onto the side of an asteroid and, what, tried pushing it away? And what was that stuff about the foreign bodies? Heavenly bodies? What did the rocket do? How does this tie into the ending of the main game? I thought it was an engine malfunction. Is there gonna be another DLC? Alright, let's take a deep breath. Clearly, there's not enough here to confidently determine what the ending means. And if you think you know, where is your video on the game, So, my conclusion is either there is no ending, or they'll explain it in another future DLC. And I'd love to go into the story, but there's really not a whole lot to it, apart from the obvious, which we learned through the briefings. HB01, the station from the main game, blew up. This damaged the station we're on right now. After doing some repairs, we started collecting data from the comms terminals about what happened to HB01. The data we collected pointed towards some foreign body as the cause for the explosion of HB01, and we were told to deal with the threat by doing something. Now, the following would be my theory about what happened, what this foreign body was. I hope you still have some popcorn left over. So at the end of the main game, you're supposed to experiment with using some oxygen from some plants you've grown in a previous level to try to fuel the generator of the station. This is also the generator that blows up, causing HB01 to explode. Initially, it looks like a mechanical accident, a faulty generator. There is one thing though, the plants. They were grown using minerals from asteroids, which were mixed in with the soil to, I guess, fertilize it. That could explain the origin of this foreign body, since those minerals probably contain some sort of alien organic matter, and maybe the pollen from the flowers got sucked in with the oxygen. And the traces of what caused the malfunction? We detected them on this random asteroid too. Now, you may be asking, how the hell does a signal antenna detect organic matter? And I would answer, I don't know, I'm not a biologist. Maybe it's some sort of radiation though, but no matter what it is, it seems to have spilled from some sort of container that crashed on the asteroid. I mean, there is wreckage surrounding it, but that's just a theory. A game theory. When it comes to the gameplay, well, it's really pretty straightforward. Most of the difficulty comes from the controls, and just like in the main game, mastering the controls is really satisfying. The progressional tool system was also pretty cool. Every time I got a new tool, we were very curious to see how it worked. Overall, everything is really well done, hardly any bugs, but the problem I have with the DLC stems from the lack of variety that I keep talking about. As I've already said a couple of times, you're mostly doing the same thing over and over again. I mean, for God's sakes, day 4 and day 6 are basically the same day, except 6 is a little more difficult and there's also collectibles. Now, I'm not saying there needs to be a constant drip of new mechanics introduced throughout the game for it to be good. Other games I like, such as Papers, Please and Resident Evil, are also very straightforward in that regard. But they've got something else there to keep you hooked, like the story or the characters. And I know I'm comparing apples to oranges. Cleanup is a DLC after all, and my examples are standalone games. But when it comes to gameplay, that doesn't really change. Heavenly Body's Cleanup DLC is also fairly short. It took me and Z around 3 hours to finish it. And yeah, it'd probably take you a little more if you're playing alone, but that runtime kinda loses its value when you're spending half of it recycling scrap. The devs say playtime is comparable to the main game, and fair enough for the first playthrough. But the main game had replay value. You had the challenges for each mission, you had the achievements, you had the collectibles. There was a lot to it. There's not really anything else to do in Cleanup. To wrap up, I just want to say that no matter what, Cleanup is still a really good experience. Sure, I still prefer the main game, but I did have a lot of fun playing this DLC, and I think many people would. I mean, in a market where almost every big budget project is a soulless cash grab, playing something made with passion, and for such an incredible price too, is really quite rare. It also gave me another reason to revisit one of my favorite games, so I really appreciate that they decided to make more content. And I really look forward to seeing what they've got cooking for the future, be it on Heavenly Bodies or a different project entirely. And I hope this video has given you a good idea of what the DLC is. And if you do decide to try it out, I hope you end up having fun with it. That being said, thank you very much for watching, as always. Your support is incredible. And I'm sorry it took this long to get another video like this out, but I hope it was worth the wait. Anyway, for now, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.